Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Awareness Explorers. Great to have you again. And I'm super excited. I say this often, but I really have been using our guest stuff lately, and I find it fascinating. I'll get to Todd and Pernille Lent Damore in a moment when I introduce them. First, saying hi to Brian. What's happening with you?
How are you doing, Jonathan? I'm thrilled, as you mentioned, that you know a great deal about our guests, and I know a little less. But I have been able to learn some about the Awakening curriculum and the Fetters, so I'm very looking forward to it.
Anyways, Brian, I'd like to introduce Todd and Pernille. Todd and Pernille Lent Damore have created their Awakening curriculum, a comprehensive path to awakening using what they call the Wheel of Identification, which is their framing of the 10 Buddhist Fetters. Their approach provides practical applications to wake up moment to moment amidst our everyday life. And together they have more than 50 years of Buddhist practice, and they're not that old. So they started when they were 3, I believe. And they combine this with elements of psychology, mind-body trauma release, and integrated non-dual inquiry to help people live a well-rounded human life, free from attachments and sufferings. We'll mention all their different ways to contact them, but they have something called the Awakening Curriculum, Unfettered Mindfulness, and other sites, which we'll mention at the end. Anyways, welcome to Awareness Explorers. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so
We're
much
really,
again.
really happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having us.
Huge fans.
Absolutely.
Oh,
we were
great.
sitting here being old girl, fangirling it here.
Well, you're making me feel like a rock star for the moment. Anyways, which based on the Awakening curriculum is not a good thing, because you don't want to identify with anything. And for people who are not familiar with your work, which will be most people listening, what could you say is what you're trying to do to help awaken them, or what might be unique about your approach?
Yeah, so I would say what we do is we take the 10 fetters, which other people have worked with, which for anybody who doesn't know, it's effectively 10 concepts, right? They're not real things, even though we use the framework of breaking them or weakening them. They're conceptual ideas about ways in which we cause identification and suffering in our own lives. And this is kind of like a handy toolbox, the way I look at it, to see throughout our day, we can check in moment to moment and find out, in what way am I identifying right now? In what way am I creating something out of nothing? Am I creating some sort of problem where it's not actually existent in my 5 senses? And it's basically coming back to that, and through that, starting to see through all of those illusions that keep us bound into the idea of a separate individual self, having, all sorts of cravings and aversions that we have to be constantly working with or fighting against or satisfying, having those, any sort of like conceptual attachments, all of that stuff gets seen through little by little. And I think what really makes it different, the way that we work, is that so much of it is about the humanity of it. It's not about just transcending and leaving the human experience. It's about recognizing that whatever we are experiencing right now, is a purely human experience from a purely human perspective. And what we're doing is effectively a type of human awakening. I mean, we don't know what it's like to wake up as a dog or to wake up as a bee, if such a thing is possible. We're using the tools that we have as this biological organism that happens to be a human, and seeing all the ways in which the brain and psychology and biology are
Biochemistry
is making this experience what it is, and being able to see through that kind of, the matrix of it, through the illusory nature of that, in order to have a more wide open, expansive, loving, compassionate, less, experience filled with less suffering and less selfing. But yeah, I think it's really important to have that human aspect to it, where we're not denying anything. It's not about leaving the body behind on some other shore or something. It's like we're really about the integration of both the practice into daily life as well as the aftermath of, it's not about just being enlightened, going off into a cave and never being seen again. It's really how you live the best possible human existence while we're here.
And yeah, and the fetters is it's a Buddhist way. It's from the Samyana Sutta that is talking about the 10 different ways that we identify. And like Todd said, there are none of them that are real. But for example, like the self-identification that we have, where I regard me being here, this is my body, this is my gender, this is my name, that all the things that I take as being mine and take as being a part of me, that's the first fetter. And when we work with that, it's really seeing through how much in my everyday life am I identifying as a me that I either need to protect, or to to defend, or to or what do you call it?
Like manipulate the world so that it's to our
exactly. So exactly. So the way that I view myself is not being challenged in any way, and that can be maintained. Maintained or protect. And that's the first fetter. So it's not because that is a real thing, but it's just tools to become aware of us living in our everyday lives in a way that is creating a lot of pain and suffering. The second fetter is about all the feelings and emotions that we can have, because we have this tendency of believing that I feel hurt. And Jonathan, what you said to me, that really hurt me, and now you need to apologize. Like that is a real thing. Like you can say something that really hurts me. Is that even possible? Or is that back to the first fetter again, that I'm selfing? There's somebody here that I'm trying to protect or to defend or to maintain. And for me to maintain that idea about myself, you need to be in the world in a way that does not challenge that belief, that underlying belief that I have about myself. So
I've read the 10 Fetters before, and they really didn't hit me much. They're a little bit not clear as to what to do with them. And one of the things I liked about your work is you kind of translated them into very practical tools and things that people can actually do. And Brian, you're less familiar with Todd and Pernilla's work than I. I'm wondering what your impression was, and just looking at a little bit and what they just said, which I thought was a great description.
Yeah, I thought it was a great description too. I first encountered the Fetters through Angelo DeLullo. I had not known about him before, but he talks about them a lot, and I read them, and I was hoping that you might clear up a confusion that I have about them. I'm probably mistaken, but my confusion is that it seems to me that there's an inherent contradiction in them. In other words, except for the first and eighth fetters, it seems like it's a method for pointing out our shortcomings as opposed to breaking the identification with the individual self. So I was wondering how you avoid what Adyashanti calls rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah.
It's very much about acknowledging what is actually here, because we have a tendency to spiritual bypass, going like, I am above being angry at Jonathan. Poor Jonathan. I am above being angry at Jonathan because he spoke to me the way I am only seeing the world in a very positive light, so I don't feel anger at all, which means I'm just bypassing what is actually happening in my lived experience in this biology here. When I see Jonathan, I am releasing adrenaline, I'm releasing cortisol, I'm releasing lots of hormones. I might get clammy hands. There's like a physical response to meeting up or to speaking with, and denying that is just spiritual bypassing. So what we use the fetters to is acknowledge what is actually here, and really truly acknowledge, accept, and understand what is arising here in my lived experience. It doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that this is what is happening in this biology, and that can be looked into through my direct experience. Really, what Todd is so good at at making inquiries into the experience, but what does that actually feel? What is it? And I will end up in a space where I see, okay, I don't want to feel all this whenever I speak with Jonathan. I don't want to feel all this. Okay. Can I be in a body where the fact of the matter is that I am feeling all this? And that has two answers. Yes, I can be with it, or no, I cannot be with it. I don't want to be that person. Okay. Instead of creating resistance to the resistance, I now acknowledge that I have resistance to the way that this is presenting itself. So the fetters, the way that we work with them, it's very much about slowing down and zooming in and acknowledging what is here, what is not what I want to be here, but what is actually my reality. And by doing that, you create a very intimate and honest and authentic relationship to your lived experience. And that is where the awakening is happening, because you no longer fight with what is actually here. You truly see what is presenting itself, not what you want to be presenting itself, but what actually is here.
Mm-hmm. And you would describe what is actually here as your direct sensory perception without the story about it. Is that correct?
Yes. We keep coming back to the sensory experience. What is what we call direct experience? And that is what you can see, smell, taste, touch, and feel. But it's not what you think you're seeing or what you think you're smelling. It's what is actually there. And just becoming aware, for everybody who's watching this right now, for everybody just to become aware, okay, what part of what I'm seeing right now am I actually seeing? And what do I think I'm seeing? Because those are two different things, completely different things. And we can completely delude ourselves in our minds to what we think is here, where what is actually here right now, that is what is presenting itself in reality. And that is what we can work with and acknowledge, accept, and understand.
That's well said. You know, I was taking notes during Todd's talk at Perfectly Okay, and I came up with a one-sentence summary. See if it works for you.
Yeah. 4 hours of talk in a sentence, please.
4 hours of talking, 50 years of work. Now the guy's putting it into one freaking sentence. Yeah.
Please do that.
Okay.
Would love that.
We so need to learn how to condense. So please share.
Okay. And of course, I'm always trying to turn conceptual ideas into techniques. Yeah. So the technique I was using based on your stuff is what is here with no resistance and no labels.
Yeah. Thank you.
Spot on.
We're now going to close down.
I charge for that, by the way. That'll cost you $20,000.
Fair enough. Totally fair. Yeah, that really is the fundamental tool. It is really coming down, and it's deceptively easy and then also a little bit deceptively challenging, just because we spend most of our lives living through our projections. We don't realize, we don't really stop to notice how much of our experience is basically like a virtual reality overlay of what we think we're interacting with. The way, when we meet a person, like you were saying, all of my assumptions about that person, all the past histories, all of those, I've seen somebody like that before, and I'm putting all of that onto this person, even though we've just met for the first time maybe, but I've seen people who dress like that or who look like that in some way, and I'm making these assumptions. And just even like labels, I use the description of, or the example of a tree all the time, that we have seen thousands of trees in our lifetime, but every one of them is unique. We've never really seen a tree. We see the brain very quickly takes a bunch of similarities in and then smacks a label of tree on top of it, just because it saves energy. That way, we don't have to actually experience every little nook and cranny of the bark and the leaves and try to assimilate all of these different little fleeting images into something bigger. But we do that with absolutely everything in our lives, so that we just live through these very shorthand labels as opposed to really absorbing into the sensory fields as they present themselves. And then, as I talked about in the second of the POK talks, the first fetters, we're really talking about coming down out of all of those labels and all of the ideas and getting down out of thought into what seems to be here, like into the senses. So instead of being completely taken up in not knowing the difference between like my thoughts about a person and the person, or my thoughts about a situation and the reality of the situation, we come down into the body, we come back to the reality of here. But then once we start working with the upper five fetters, then we even start to break that down. Also, they're what we take to be that sort of stable grounding reality of the five senses. The more we absorb into those and see how much we're interacting with those in kind of very easily less nuanced ways, the more we just absorb into each of those, they start to break down, and that's when you start to have kind of the more wild psychedelic awakening experiences that people tend to have.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Course in Miracles, where they will say something like, nothing you see is real, or something like that. One of the things I found personally helpful was, I'm not sure which fetter it was. It was, it was somewhere in the first five, where you're really taking a microscope in a certain way with your awareness to what is it that's creating this sense of a separate self in this moment. Yeah. And I found that a really interesting inquiry, because most of the time, for some reason, I feel like Jonathan, even though, I'm basically pure awareness playing this game. Yeah. And it's very interesting to look at, well, how am I creating that? And a lot of the tools that you talk about were really like microscopes, looking at, well, as you focus that microscope, it all starts to fall apart.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering if you talk a little bit more about that process, like how that works, or how people can make use of that.
Absolutely. Actually, that was what I was planning when you had asked me if I wanted to do, or asked us if we wanted to do a guided meditation. It was exactly that sort of thing that I was kind of walk through, because there is what I think is kind of the foundational tool that we use in most of the fetters, which is this kind of microscopic zooming in. And so essentially we take all of our senses apart into pieces. And again, it's something which I think we kind of forget, that we have five senses in general. We take in like the whole of the world, and it has chirping birds and barking dogs and, a TV that's blaring. And when I talk to somebody, it looks like the words are coming directly out of their body. Like everything is kind of bound in a way where it seems homogenous. And what we're doing is recognizing that, first of all, there are five, what I call external senses, right? So you have the visual field in front of you, you have the auditory field around you, that, you hear the birds and the dogs and things that are outside. You have the sense of, whatever's in the room. You can smell things, you can taste whatever's in your mouth that you've eaten, and you can feel the senses in the body. You can feel what it's like to be sitting in a chair and have your heart beating and all of those things. But then we also have these, what I think of as the five internal senses that you have, with the eyes closed. You can still conjure an image of something. You can think right now of an apple that's in checkerboard red and green, right? And unless you have aphantasia or something, when you literally can't create internal images, you're going to see something, right? So that's like your internal field. And then we have the internal auditory space, where we can often constantly hear ourselves chattering in our own head throughout the day, or, pick up a song that, like if I asked you to think of your favorite song, you could probably do that. And then we also have the memory of a scent, or the memory of a flavor. They're all available to you. And then also you can think of, sensations in the body. Like you can remember what it feels like to like hit your thumb with a hammer, and you immediately feel that throbbing, the swelling in the finger. It's there. So what we do is we break down our experience into those, five internal and external senses, and then basically go through in any moment. It sounds, much more complicated until you actually try it, but it's effectively to just get used to what is actually being experienced. And again, we'll do this more in depth later, but it's to just go, okay, what do I actually feel like right now? The way that I'm sitting, the way that I'm standing, the way that I'm doing dishes, the way that I'm writing a check, whatever I'm doing, right? What feels identified right now? And so we check in with our emotions. We check into how those emotions are showing up in the body. Are they felt physically in certain parts of the body? Are you seeing mental images that are correlating to this emotion, or a thought which is triggering this? Are you hearing yourself talk? Most of us have like a mental visual image of our body or face, and there's like a feedback going on of what seems to be my face in a certain emotional, giving a certain emotional expression, or a body in a certain posture. And there's a feedback to, this is me sitting here in this posture. I can kind of see it in my mind. Are you seeing that right now? Is that influencing it? Does it sound like the voice that you're hearing in your head is in your voice? We don't take anything for granted. The real key for everything that we do is curiosity. We're not doing any of this to get something out of it. Like, there's a gold medal at the end. We're not forcing it. It's not like, this is my new practice that's been, given to me by the doctor, and I have to do this 3 times a day or else. This is like how weird it is to live this life for however many decades we've had and not explore these things all the time. How interesting and fascinating the world becomes when we're no longer bound into these same habitual reactions and the same ways of seeing the world. And so we're basically over and over again just tuning in, and the more you do this, the faster it gets, and the more it can become just this really fast scan of the body where you just recognize like all the different sensations, all the different mental images and sounds. And then you're basically looking, if we're talking about the first fetter, you're looking at like, where am I in any of that? What feels like the me somewhere in the center of this experience? What feels like the me in, why do I feel identified in this? And it's a rhetorical question. It's not to come up with some verbalizable answer, but it's just to point back to looking in to see what exactly about this experience feels identified or gives the impression that there is a me central in the middle of it. But then we use the same thing when we're talking about craving and aversion, and we believe that those are real things, and we take apart our experience and try to find where they exist and where that feeling of like need for that chocolate cake really is, and we take apart the experience of that. And basically we use it through most of the fetters, this kind of investigative process.
And I just want to say that the practical application of that is obviously that everything you think is a suffering in your life, whether you have had like developmental trauma, or whether you have experienced like a car crash, or something has happened in your life, your family dynamics, whatever you have taken with you and carried around as a part of that is part of me your entire life, that is being looked at. So you are no longer reacting to things without knowing where that actually comes from. You start to be in situations where you can respond and think, that is weird. That why do I feel angry when somebody says something? Why do I feel nervous when my boss wants to speak to me in the office? Where does that come from? Or why do I react with road rage when I'm apparently super spiritual and love everybody on the planet? So it's that the practical application of it, that you completely see through what you assume to be a solid reason for suffering in your life, that when you slow down and you zoom in and you pick it apart the way that Todd talks about, you really become aware of how much of that is assumption too. And it's a resistance to something that is here. It's a resistance to a resistance. It's a reaction to an assumption. So it's like a label on a label on a label, and that we're avoiding, but it's not here at all.
Yeah, I remember Ajahn Shanti once said, one step to enlightenment, don't resist anything.
Yeah. Completely.
Yeah.
And especially the more we are the more we are fine-tuned on what we're experiencing, there's really nothing to resist. We resist pain because we feel it and then immediately go to the reaction response against it. That there's a pain, I don't like that. There must be something wrong. Don't feel it. Tense up other parts of the body in response to it,
Yeah.
embrace from it, as opposed to just, okay, there's an acceptance. There is a pain in the knee right now. Breathe, feel into it without the label of pain, even without the label of discomfort, without without the future, without any thoughts about what it might mean. Of course, please only do this if it's not like an acute issue where you're going to have a heart attack or something. This is like, more for chronic things, or if you're sitting meditating and you feel the pain, or you have a broken foot or something, or broken limb that has been looked at properly and all that. If
you have a nail gun in your hand and a nail in your foot, please seek help. It's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's a practical level to all of this. But and I say that because I was doing a retreat one time years ago, and I was sitting doing this. I had knee pain, and I sat there and I just focused on just the sensation, and the pain dissolves, and then the sensation just becomes really interesting, and it's warm and it's radiating, and then it gets, bigger and smaller, and it kind of disappears for a while, and it's totally like neutral or even pleasant, and it's really wonderful. But at the time I didn't know I actually had a knee problem. And when I went to stand up, it was so swollen. It was like I couldn't sit, cross-legged. I couldn't really sit on the floor for like a day and a half. And it ended up I needed surgery later that year. So like it is doing these things within,
the middle way.
Exactly.
The middle way.
Find the middle way. But the point is that we can take, even chronic pain, things like that, and really absorb into them. And that sensation just becomes raw, pure, unfiltered sensation, which is absolutely lovely. So there's nothing to resist when we come down below the level of label.
I came up with a sentence the other day that is like, if you don't, it's not. And that is basically explaining all of the fetters in just those two sentences. I was considering we can just delete the entire awakening curriculum and just tell people, if you don't, it's not, and then it's sorted. Because it's basically that. If you don't, it's a bit like the double arrow in the Buddhist story, that you're hit by an arrow and that there's pain in the body from where that arrow hit your body. But the extra type of pain is coming from you thinking about all the things that now my shoulder is hurt with the arrow, and oh my goodness, it's going to get inflamed, and what is happening then? And all of that extra layer that we add to everything is where...
Which is 95% probably.
That is where the majority of suffering is. So if you don't, it's not. If you don't create all of those things in your mind, it's not really what you think is here. Something else is here. If you don't create all of that, or if at least you just slow down and zoom in and notice with curiosity, what am I adding to this situation right now?
Yeah, I've always loved that. I've always loved that double arrow analogy. It always seemed to me that that pain is the first arrow, and the idea that it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Or, you say all the thoughts about it is the second arrow. But I wanted to just go back to something you said earlier, Todd, about looking in and asking, is there a self here in the experience? And I remember doing that practice and not succeeding, because my answer was always yes. There's the experience, and then there's the me that's experienced. And then later on, I mean, it was actually years later, something occurred to me to ask, are there two experiences?
Yeah.
It's only one experience.
Yeah.
It's so that me experiencing and the experience aren't two things. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that, would you say that's the right track?
It's a part about that we have a thinker and we have a thought, but the thinker is a thought.
Yeah. And yes, I think because these things are so experiential, it's like we know the answer before we go into them. We know we've been told that there's no self. We know what the punchline is, but it's in the seeking of it. And so usually the real benefit to doing the microscopic taking apart and going into it is because we often just have like a nebulous feeling that I'm located somewhere behind my eyes. I'm just here. It just feels like me. And what we find the more, and I do this with people one-to-one a lot, is like, taking apart, okay, so now where do you feel like you are? And then they'll tell me where they are. And okay, now let's feel into that. Do you feel the sensation behind the eyes? Do you feel, buzzing here? Is it the muscles of the eyes that you're feeling? Are you behind or in front of your face? Are you, we can start to break things apart in ways that all of a sudden that feeling, that certainty that you have that, well, I know I'm there someplace, actually gets shaken, because what we take to be the me that is there wasn't that. It turns out it's just actually a physical ball of sensation that I wasn't really noticing was there, or that it was just a mental image, or, there's some other maybe more unbounded feeling of presence or something. But then even going into that, okay, well, is that felt in your felt sense? Are you getting like a mental image of this sort of space and darkness, or even the body with some sort of shimmer around it? How is it showing up that you are getting the conceptual idea that this is still a me? We can't take any of that for granted. And little by little, it's sort of like a very sequential guided neti kind of a practice. But without the conceptualization of even saying, this is not me, it's just recognizing directly, like, oh, if I feel like I'm a sensation in my leg and I sense just that raw sensation, the ownership of that starts to just fall away on its own.
Said that really well. I in doing some of your practices, I noticed that what really got me much more than anything else was the voice in my head.
Mm.
It's pretty consistent. It's, it's playing 24/7 pretty much. And that I tend to identify with it. Whereas I'm not so much identified with, say, sensations in my body. That's easier for me to disidentify with. So I'm wondering what you would say to people in terms of not identifying with that voice, which does sound, it speaks in my voice, it doesn't sound like Mickey Mouse. It actually, and it's making declarations. And I tend to think it's me, even though I don't have control over it. What would you say is useful in that disidentification process?
Well, it's actually funny. I've had some funny experiences with that one. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a good way to go about it, but there have been periods in my life where I would listen to so much of somebody else. Like there were years where I listened to like a lot of Alan Watts. And then all of a sudden the voice in my head would start to sound like Alan Watts. And there was a period where I was reading and listening to a lot of Hunter Thompson, and the voice in my head started to sound like Hunter Thompson. And it was like, I realized then that this is not as definitive as it seems, that this is really me. It is a very malleable sense that it just happens to be, I am used to hearing this, right? We hear ourselves talk out loud more than we hear anybody else. Even if we live with somebody else, we're always in this body hearing this vessel talk. Mm-hmm. So it's like the voice that we're most familiar with. And if you kind of play with that and change it, maybe take one recording of somebody, or one, like Alan Watts or something, he's a really good one for it. Listen to it over and over and over again every day. You might start to find that internal sound actually starts to change. What I also point to more practically than doing that is to recognize that what you're also hearing is not just the internal sound that's making it feel identified. That most of us don't realize, when we have internal thoughts, we are making very tiny movements of the tongue and the jaw, the lips, that go along with it. So I usually say to people, if you haven't recognized this, just sit there naturally. You don't have to try to say anything out loud or using the mouth. But if you just recite the alphabet in your mind and pay attention to what it feels like in your lips and your tongue and your jaw, you're probably noticing these very micro movements that are happening. And that is giving you this, what I call a haptic feedback, like we have in like VR and phones and stuff. It gives you that like vibration that makes it feel like something's real. It's that feedback that, well, I'm talking. I'm feeling the same muscles and the same ligaments that work when I am speaking externally. Thinking in my head, still going on, just to a smaller degree. And it's giving you that feedback that, of course, I'm the one thinking this. But it can help, for one thing, doing that, noticing that what you're actually experiencing. Another useful thing is to recognize that you're not your thoughts, that you can't think your thoughts. You haven't chosen a single thought. And so the more you get used to that, then you recognize that that voice that's going on, even if it sounds like it's in your voice, you are not creating that narrative that's going on. You're not creating that dialogue. So see if you can step back from it and just listen to that voice as though it was just a speaker or a TV in the room. That isn't that interesting? You can hear it. You have no idea what the next sentence is going to be that comes up. You have no idea what the next word is going to be that comes up. So you're listening from this passive third person perspective. But then also the really important thing that we also are always point to is there's probably some personal component to what you're hearing in your head, or if the times that it feels more identified than others is usually because there's a personal component there. So notice, first of all, are the stories, because it's like, well, I have to do this later and then I have to do this, and there's something, personally relevant in planning about it. Is it something about, some family issue or something like that? And then how do you feel in the body? Because again, that haptic feedback in the body, the emotional response that happens to the thoughts, is what's giving that thought some tangibility. It's what makes it feel like it's personal, that it's about me, because now I'm thinking about, well, I have to do my taxes and I have to get that done. And you feel the feeling in the body. That gives you that extra little boop to, that's a thought that I have to take seriously. Right. I have to keep reminding myself I have to do that or else I'm going to forget. And if I forget, there are going to be consequences. And just feel like, step back and just notice there's sensation in the body. There's unease. There's a feeling of stress. There's a feeling of worry. This voice has no personal component to it other than that it seems to be saying things that are about or relevant to this being that's here. And then we can even use like the second fetter stuff of like, why am I being stressed out about this? Why am I feeling anxious? And that's where we deal with like the shadow work, the more psychological aspects of things. And it gives us something to feel into of like, well, I'm always feeling unsafe. I always feel like if I don't do something exactly perfect, I'm, going to be punished for it, or there's something, some calamity coming. And we can feel into that, and okay. And we can, we use like reparenting or positive affirmations or things like that to help soothe that sense, because that can be back from a pre-verbal time.
I think it's really important to emphasize the part that you said that we have millions of thoughts every single day, and the majority of thoughts that you have, you're not even aware that you're having, because it's just thoughts compiling and coming over and over and over. But some of the thoughts, they have a physical component. Like you get like a contraction in your chest. And because of that haptic feedback of the contraction in your chest, you think that thought is more important than all the other thoughts because I felt it in my body. And that's the part that we pick apart. Okay, so you think of taxes, you get a knot in your stomach right away. So now you think that the taxes are important because of a knot in the stomach. So let's pick that apart. How does it actually feel in your stomach right now? If you don't think of the taxes, but just feel in your body, how does that actually feel? And you can see, oh, there's a contraction in my stomach. This contraction in my stomach, when I don't think about the taxes, this contraction in my stomach starts as another thought about me being unsafe. Okay, so now you have a thought, but now you are into what we talked about before, a loop of a loop of a loop of a loop. And it's no longer just about a thought, me having a thought about something. You have created so much something out of nothing. And it's that feedback loop that is happening that makes us believe that we are our thoughts, because I can feel in my body that I'm thinking about taxes and I am thinking about the taxes. But it's right. like I said before, that we think that we have thoughts and we have a thinker that is thinking thoughts, but the thinker is a thought too. That there is no one in there conjuncting, making all of those thoughts popping out into your body, and it's the thinker that is thinking that, and it's a little avatar sitting in the back of your eyes. It's not like that. The thinker is a thought too, but the moment that there's a physical component to the thought, we believe that is a me, I thought of that, and this is important because I can feel it's important.
Well
Yeah,
said.
that's so important. And those are really excellent approaches. I would imagine, and one other approach, at least one that's helped me, was to ask, well, who is that voice talking to?
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
but it only helps when the answer is not verbal.
No, but that is such a great pointer too. It keeps turning back to that. But it's like where when you look for, who is looking, and you can get that kind of infinite regress backwards where it's like always somebody else, which brings you ultimately to your, Brian, your realization there that there is only one experience, that is just all that's there. But it's like having it conceptually, having somebody tell you that doesn't do it. It has to
You
be
need
that
to experience it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm curious, the first 5 fetters are kind of how we create this sense of identity. Would you say this second 5 fetters are more on, what would you say how they're different?
Yep, the first 5 fetters are very, very practical in our everyday life because it's about me identifying with my thoughts, with my feelings and emotions, me identifying with my habits, my patterns, all the things that I do every single morning and all the justifications that we have to why we do it. All of that has like the selfing in the middle, that I'm exercising to lose weight, or I'm eating healthy so I can, live longer. That we have that selfing in the middle. The fourth and the fifth fetter. The fourth fetter is all the things we do because or wish to happen. So we do something and or we wish for something to be different than what is here right now. So we're kind of like we're saving money for the future as if that is a thing. We I come with for example.
Yeah, I mean, say like I want a new car
Yeah.
because
Yeah, exactly. I want a new car, and when I get a new car, my life is going to be great. I want to win the lottery because when I win the lottery, then my life is great. So we take from where we are right now and put ourselves into a thought scenario where we live and we want things to be like that. When we're going on holiday, the 4 of us, we're going on a holiday, it's going to be great. And there's so many expectations tied into that. But then it rains and we lose our luggage and all of that was not part of the plan of our holiday. And then disappointment happened. And when disappointment happens, it's because we have an expectation to things happening the way we have thought we wanted them to happen. So in the fourth fetter, we become aware of how much do I project my wishes and wants into another scenario, into another person, that we want things to be different than what actually is here right now. And the fifth fetter is.
I was going to say also, you should say also that the fourth fetter is also a lot about deflecting from, what's here too. And I think I'll say also more about that in the fifth. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
make sure we mention it. No, go ahead.
No, but the fifth fetter is then about all the things we don't want. So I don't want, Janice at my work to speak to me the way that she speaks to me, as if I have any say over Janice and how she is in the world. But if she spoke differently to me, my day would be so much better. So it's all the things we don't want instead of looking at what is actually here. So the lower 5s are very much very practical, low level, easy to work with, recognizable, release suffering in a very straightforward way.
Yeah, and again, like I was just gonna every time that you feel like, well, I really want a beer, or I really want to chocolate cake or a candy bar or whatever, you can feel into, is that urge coming up because you're distracting from something that's here. You're diverting from something that's uncomfortable in your situation, in your body, in your thoughts. What is happening right now that is seemingly going to distract you from for a little while and give you a promise of something better.
Yeah, so we all know that with doom scrolling, with having half a bottle of wine when we come back from work or something, because we have lived in a way where we did not like the way that our life was, but we can divert a bit from it. We can deflect a bit from it by doing something else, not looking at what is actually here. So it's basically looking at our everyday life on how we are not present in the now and why we're not present in the now, because there's always an underlying belief, like an undercurrent, that is creating what we call the toxic starting point, where you have a deep-seated feeling of fear, anger, guilt, and shame, and you are doing everything in your power to avoid feeling that. And we do that with all the diversions, with smoking and drinking and gambling and yelling at people in traffic and
cell phones,
self-scrolling and all of that. So that's the lower fives. The higher fives, it's more that when you really have realized that all the things you assume is reality is not, then let's see how far that one goes. And that's what
psychedelics can help a lot with that.
Yeah, very much so. It's one of those things where the two meet up a lot, you know, like, and if you use psychedelics and you have these experiences, I think the really important thing is the integration of it, so that it's not just a peak experience that's, you know, put on a shelf that you remember. Or I think another really, just since you brought it up, because I've worked with a lot of people who have history of using psychedelics, and one of the problems that I've seen is that it gives them these false expectations that, you know, they took acid, they had this amazing experience, they became one with everything, they were, you know, just absolutely expansive and peak, you know, religious kind of experience. And then they expect, like, I need that again, but without the acid. And so all of these practices seem to be failing if they haven't had a complete, you know, permanent breakdown of everything in a way that leads them into being this, you know, completely blissed out, expansive psychedelic experience forever, which I think is maybe a bit of a disappointment for people. But we tell them that that's not the end goal, is to live in a completely, you know, permanent state of psychedelia, but to rather take the insights from that, integrate them, and be able to live a world of that sort of positive detachment, you know, where we know that it's not really real, but we can play in it as though it were. And
it's also what we do in the higher fives,
exactly,
where the six fetters, where we look into that delusion that we have, that I am a subject here and there's an object out there. So we play with that delusion and notice what is actually real, not what I think is real, but what is actually real. For example, if I ask you guys to close your eyes and feel into your foot. First of all, your eyes will look down because we're talking about the feet. And second of all, you will probably see an image of a foot. It might not even be your foot, but of a foot for your inner eye. And you have a feeling that your foot is somewhere south of where your eyes are. But if you really, really feel into your foot right now, you can feel your toes, you can feel your foot. Maybe you can feel your socks, your feet resting on the floor. But those are assumptions of your foot. If you really feel into your foot, you cannot discern where your foot stops and your sock starts, or where your foot stops and the floor starts. You can just feel buzzing sensation. And if you look even further into it, that buzzing sensation is not necessarily south of your eyes. It's just a buzzing sensation in space. Which begs the question, do you have a foot? So take a deep breath and open your eyes again. So
there's a lot of those experiments that really get you to kind of loosen your grip on all your assumptions about reality and you.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's basically a way to be on psychedelics without taking the drugs.
Yes, completely. Exactly. And really see what is actually here. And the seventh fetter, we dissolve all the things, we look into and discern all the things that is something out of nothing. That we are creating something that is not actually here, but we are assuming it is, so we're creating it into as if it is. And when you become aware of that, it kind of turns into particles. It's not a thing anymore. And it's also where we work with time. The assumption of time is not a thing. Change is happening, but time is not. Time is a dimension. We know that now. So it's really noticing that where we feel, because we have a biological vessel, a meat suit that we live in, we feel that time is like horizontal, where we have the past and the present and the future. But in reality, it's vertical. Everything is happening at the same time, and it's right now that is happening. When you think of your past, it's not happening in the past, it's happening now. When you think about the future, it's not happening in the future, it's happening right now. So we are taking the horizontal level of time and making it vertical where it actually is. So we no longer create something out of nothing. And in the eighth fetter, it's dissolving the all beliefs that you have, anything that you create in your life, to have a solid footing standing on. But I know this is real. If you're not creating something out of nothing, how do you know anything is real? How do you know that even what you perceive to be real is anything but your perception? Can it ever be anything but your perception? And how do you know your perception is real? If you're on psychedelics would perceive something completely different, then how do you actually know that your perception is real at all? And in the ninth fetter, we completely stop any idea of thinking, since there is not creating something out of nothing anymore, and there's no time to do anything in, and there's nothing that you can say has a solid foundation in anything. We just flow with whatever is arising. So it's very much a flow fetter, where we move with whatever is arising right now. So there's not really much planning happening. There's like practical things like setting an alarm and having a clock so we know to meet you guys at the right time, and having Zoom and paying the bills so we have electricity to be on. That's like, those practical things are happening, but they're not happening with stories anymore. It's just a happening that is occurring. And the 10th fetter is the wisdom of ignorance. It's really truly acknowledging that I do not know anything. I cannot come with and say anything that is in its essence true. I can only tell you how reality looks from my bubble of reality, from my perception, created from my past with my biochemistry, and I will be happy to share, but there's nothing true about it at all. Which just makes it very, very free to be with other people and to be in life, because there is no longer any truth to achieve or to anywhere particular to go. It's just that open heart-to-heart connection with other people, with whatever is arising and occurring right now, and just being present in this moment with whatever is. And it creates a freedom in me to be the way that I am, and for you to be the way that you are.
Well, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Brian?
Well, when you described that 10th fetter, I found myself experiencing that directly in the moment to such an extent that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to say anything after.
Yeah, lovely.
But
Go on.
but I still, for some reason, I still came up with some questions to ask.
Good.
Go on.
And actually, I had two questions, one for each of you, and I realize in one way that they're the same question. For example, Pernille, I watched a video of you where you said you cannot think your way out of trauma into healing. Trauma cannot be solved. It can only be healed. It's not happening in your mind. It's happening in your body.
Yeah.
And the question that I had for Todd, which was from your book, Only in Your Mind, not quite poems from the not so linear awakening path. I gather from that book that you were a victim of bullying as a kid.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was too. And when I look back on it, I realize I wouldn't have felt so victimized if I didn't feel that there was a very fragile ego that needed to be defended.
Yeah.
And so it really was the thinking that there was something wrong that was leaving me open to it, I guess. I'm not quite sure I'm finding the right words to tie these together, but I was wondering if you might.
Yeah, you
Well, no, you can go ahead. We can talk about because I think mine is just going to be basically dovetailing off of what you
Yeah.
said about the body aspect of it.
I think we have this tendency to, when we talk about trauma, when we talk about trauma, we don't only mean PTSD. We also talk about that developmental trauma that happens in just being, a very immature psychology, immature emotional state. The brain is not completely finished building, and our nervous system is still, trying to make its ways. And in that, personality is created that is very, very susceptible to whatever is happening around us. And I think that when we grow up and we have trauma, for example, like bullying that has happened, that the way that it feels today is the same way that it felt when it happened. We can create this intellectual overlay saying, but they came from a broken family, and we can kind of like intellectualize all of it. And in that, we can gaslight ourselves into believe that it wasn't really that bad and it didn't really hurt that much. And I know now that they had troubles too. They were victims too. And then we kind of shelve it and going like, well, it wasn't really that bad. Yeah, I was bullied, but it didn't really, it was bad then, but not bad now, kind of thing. And that is gaslighting, because we're not acknowledging how it actually feels in the body. If you go to a store and suddenly you see that your childhood bullies, they're standing in the store next to you, you will have a bodily reaction like that. Because your body remembers, the body keeps the score. It's an amazing book. I can recommend people to read. The bodies remember everything. Everything is stored in your body. And we have an exercise that we do. We have a workshop called the mind-body integration workshop, where we look at all these things. And there's an exercise that we do that is release the freeze. And it's basically when we in our nervous system have experienced something that puts us in a freeze state, which is often happening when we're bullied, because we can't fight back. So we can't do the fight. We can't run away because we're going to school again tomorrow. So the flight doesn't work. What we often do when we're bullied is that we end into a freeze, that we don't know what we do. And that sticks with us our entire life. So we have that tendency to, when people ask us something, we don't know what to say. We don't know how to reply, because the body's reacting like being on the spot, like we were in the schoolyard. And then we know what we want to say 36 hours later, but in the moment, we're completely blank. And that is because the body is in a freeze state. So we tend to think that the bullying was only about in the school and only about that. And then we have intellectualized it into not being an issue at all. But we have so many proofs in our everyday life that it's still a part of us. We are carrying around with it. And what we need to do is allow the body to experience and express without creating a story about it, because it's not about you. It's not about the story. It's about the body experiencing and expressing, so you can get over that. And that is like release the freeze, really like working through that and allowing the body to experience and express, so you can heal that part. And when you do that, you have an experience of liberation in your body, and your mind has no idea what just happened, because it was created and it was made without a story about what happened. But it's just a feeling of release where you have a smile on your face and you don't know why. You can just feel that you're lighter because you have experienced that release of the freeze. So we cannot think ourselves out of a trauma. We cannot talk ourselves out of a trauma. It needs to be experienced and expressed in the body.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with clients on MDMA and various releasing exercises. And you're right, the body does know the score, and it really has to kind of like a release valve, let out some of those memories in a very physical sensation way through trauma release exercises, Sedona method. There's a lot of different methods out there, and your approach of just simply letting go of all stories, feeling into sensations, allowing it to be there and releasing is a very organic process.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes so much sense when you do it, just allowing to feel that contraction in the body. And then like what Todd, he is really, really brilliant at doing in his one-to-one inquiries, where he, okay, so what is it actually here? You felt that the same sensation in your body as when you were bullied. You're not bullied now. So what is actually happening? And then you will start to become aware of that feedback loop, that there's a contraction in the body, there's a thought about it, there's another contraction in another place in the body, that is another thought about, and really slowing down, zooming in, and starting to pick apart those sensations in the body. And with that, you can have like a shake, or you can have an exhalation, or something where the body allows to let go of what it has held on to for decades.
Yeah, shaking and
Yeah.
making sounds and all those things are really part of that process often.
Yeah, we do a lot with, we had a retreat last year in 2024 on the embodiment of
the fetters. Yeah. So we took all 10 fetters and embodied all of them.
Yeah.
And then this year, that's actually next week.
Yeah,
we have
March 3rd. I know this is going to be aired after it actually happens, but it's on March 31st.
Yeah, we have the mind-body integration workshop, where we go through the different developmental ages from the second trimester until you're 12 years old, because that is where our personality is formed. And it's formed with whatever chemistry is available at the time, with whatever perception, psychological perception we have at a different age. And the funny thing is that when you look at a body standing or sitting, or the expressions that we have on our faces, the way that we move our body, it's very easy to see which age is stuck, which age there's something stuck in the body. And you can do a specific exercise to release from that age, and let the body experience and express, and then the trauma is done, because it's not really a trauma per se, it's more something that is locked in the body that needs to be unlocked.
Yeah.
So Todd, then the idea that I had voiced, that being bullied was tapping into my sense that there was a very fragile ego that needed to be defended. Is that actually not helpful? Is that just simply another story? And we really, the only recourse is to look into how that feels in the body?
Well, I think it's really helpful to, like Pernille was saying, to go at it from that sort of non-personal physical stance. But another way that we work with this, especially if we have a lot of, feelings of attachment towards, like little Brian or little Todd, we can also use like reparenting, or so one of the things that I have done with like those old bullying scenarios was to go back and put myself back to what it felt like to be, standing there being bullied by somebody, feeling the vulnerability, however it shows up in the body. But again, it's still an embodied version. So it's not just going back to the story of it. It's really being, what did it feel like? And then while feeling that, be the, older, wiser version that little Todd needed to be next to him, to defend him, to tell him what he needed to hear, to reassure him, to rewrite the history in that moment, because we're living as though the past was real. Right now, from this vantage point, the past did not exist. It doesn't exist. There's no way to actually go back to it. It's not to gaslight ourselves into believing that, nothing happened in a certain way, but it's just to recognize that from where I'm sitting right here, I can't even tell that I was ever born. I can't even tell that there was any past history at all. A memory pops into the mind, and there's a feeling in the body that corresponds to that memory. But that memory could have been a TV show or a movie I watched at one point.
Or Total Recall from the movie,
right?
Exactly. Memory.
Exactly. We don't know, right? From this perspective, we don't really know. So we can come at it from that openness where, okay, this is here. I'm recognizing how this memory, even if it's implanted, even if it's from a movie that I once saw, it's metaphorical because it's showing up now. It's a metaphor for something that needs to be acknowledged and worked with and healed now. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been here. I'm sure that we were all bullied or had other experiences that we never remember. They never come up because for whatever reason, they're not relevant to this moment. So because it's here right now, it's just calling for us to, okay, I hear you, I see you. Then again, we either feel the body, we feel what's here. Exactly. Feel whatever you're feeling in the body right now and acknowledge it. Thank it for being here because it's here to tell you something, right? We none of these things, even if it's like a feeling of sadness or shame or embarrassment or guilt, none of it is here to punish us or to make us feel less than or anything like that. It's just something that's calling out for attention. So we welcome it, we thank it, we appreciate it for trying to keep us safe. Exactly, and we love it. And then we respond and give it whatever it needs, right? It might be just attention. It might be reassurances. It might be that you are safe, you're loved, or I am safe, I am loved. Even though we're talking about there's no self, there's still aspects where that kind of programming of positive affirmations can have a deeper benefit. So we don't really shy away from using any of the tools if they're helpful. We just don't want to get caught up in them and believe that they are some ultimate reality. They're all tools that we use and then leave. And then, if you want to do the reparenting where you use that image, that memory as a metaphor, you put yourself in that perspective. You be the wiser self who's still here, and you can feel how much bigger you are now. You can feel how much more wisdom you have, how that situation that was so detrimental and painful to that younger child doesn't have to be experienced the same way now. So you can have compassion. You can treat the child with love. You can approach it and say, you're safe, you're loved. You don't, you didn't deserve that. It's not your fault. Whatever you needed to hear at that time, take the child out of the situation if they want. You can hug them. You can ask, what do you need? And then wait, and you will probably get some sort of response. It might be verbal. It might be an image of something in the mind. It's like we just kind of stay open to anything that shows up and then follow that. And it becomes a very intuitive process. And then these things just kind of get worked out in a way where it's not forceful. It's not with the idea that I have to do it in a set fashion.
And it's not to get rid of anything.
Exactly. It's not to get rid of something. It's really just to allow what's there to be there and to learn from whatever is coming up. And you can also see, like, if I'm right now having a memory of being bullied, how is that relevant to my current experience? What is going on right now that I'm feeling that same sense of embarrassment or powerlessness or whatever it was that you were feeling, and just be open and go, okay, well, this is pointing to something that I need to acknowledge in my life now.
Yeah, but I really want to emphasize the part that we're not doing any of this when we say that we go from the horizontal to the vertical. You can go back to how it felt when you were bullied, but we're not doing that for the experience not to be here anymore. We're doing it to heal the experience, to keep that experience, because that is a part of you. That experience shaped your entire life. So we don't want it to never have happened. We want to have love and compassion. And if you were standing with the wise you, if you were wise, what would you do? So it's that taking that wise you to the situation where you were bullied, and like Todd said, give yourself all the love and compassion in that moment that you needed, so you would be healed with the situation that happened, not for the situation never to have happened, but to be a healthy part of your life experience, that it has been to be you, that has shaped you into you. So it's not something we're doing to get rid of. It's something that we do to create a loving, warm, compassionate relationship too.
Beautiful. Such an important point.
Yeah. I feel like we could talk to you forever, and But in an hour, we've given a little bit of overview of what you've done. There's so many aspects to it. You know, the 10 fetters are really 10 different worldviews and things to do. And we'll get to how people can find out more about your work. But I'm interested in you guiding us a meditation that has something to do with how you use this microscopic view to really help people in a very precise way. So would you be open to sharing something like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yay. I love it.
So to start off with, you see me changing my posture, but please don't. So for right now, we're
don't do what we do.
Don't do what we do. We're going to do something different. So normally we put ourselves into a certain posture when we meditate because there's an idea that it conveys a sense of peacefulness, of, being the Buddha, something like that. But what we want to do when we're doing these exercises is not to convey anything different than what is currently here. So I want you to become aware, whatever you're doing in whichever posture you're in right now, how it feels to be you in this moment. So, we have the idea that the posture really changes our being. And so, for instance, if you just imagine for a second, if you were standing, walking down the street with your hands behind your back, chest out, head up, that's a very different feeling than if you were walking down the street, looking at the ground, shoulders hunched over, head down. So right now, take stock of how you're feeling. Take stock of what position the body is in. Take stock of any feelings, any emotions that are just floating around in your space. And then we can start to explore specifically. So to begin with, where does it feel like you are located right now? Notice if anything pops to mind immediately, or if anything jumps out in your experience. If so, for right now, just take note of it. We want to take stock before we start going in with the microscope and taking apart all of our sensations. Okay. Now, let's all become acquainted with all of our sense fields so that we have easy access to noticing what is showing up where. So for right now, if your eyes were closed, open them. Take in the room around you. Notice alone what is your visual field. See if you can decouple it from any sounds that are coming from any objects, if you happen to notice that. Just take in the colors and the shapes. Also recognize if there is a very quick recognition of what objects are. Are you getting a sense of the name of the object, the past history of it, whether you have any likes or dislikes towards it? And see if you can just notice that that is a filter that's happening on top of the raw experience of color and shape. Now close your eyes. And I want you to visualize a red rose floating in front of you. Most of us have some sort of an internal visual sense. Some have less or more than others. But see if you can visualize a red rose and maybe even get it to spin floating in front of you. That is your internal visual field. That's where most of our thoughts, our visual thoughts, are happening. But also take note, in this internal visual space, do you right now have any sort of image of your body or your face? It might be accurate or it might be extremely vague. It might be in color. It might be black and white. It might be three-dimensional. It might be two-dimensional. It might be looking out as though it's a segment of your own body facing the same direction that you believe your face is pointing. Or it might be seen almost from a third-person perspective. But it's helping to orient the brain to the body and space, and to create cohesion, like a map of all of the various sensations that are happening in this boundless space. It's useful, but it's often taken to mean more than it really does. We often identify with this image that shows up, however it shows up. You may even take a moment to picture your foot, your right foot. And do you see if there's an image that shows up of a right foot? And now picture your left hand. Do you see an image of a left hand floating in the approximate space where you believe your left hand to be? This is the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Now let's turn our attention to the external sound field, the auditory field, and listen for any sounds in the room. Maybe birds, dogs, my voice, traffic, a refrigerator, the kind of ambient hum of a room. Just notice it. And like we did with the visual field, notice if there's an immediate labeling of that voice, of those birds, of those cars. Do you immediately seem to know what is creating the sound and which direction that sound is coming from? See if you can relax that and just hear the raw sensation of sound. Now take stock of the internal auditory system. You might hear your own voice speaking. If I asked you right now to picture or to hear your favorite song, you can probably get a passable representation of the music and even the voice of a singer who's not you. Again, if you hear yourself saying the alphabet, or just listen for a random sentence that appears in the mind, this is the internal auditory space. The sounds that show up here are not your voice. The sounds that show up here are still thoughts. They're distinct from the visual thoughts that you've already experienced, but they're still thoughts nonetheless. And we can treat all thoughts with this same detached respect. We acknowledge them, we acknowledge their possible utility, but we also don't need to identify with them. We can recognize that if they are being heard and if they are being seen, by definition, I am not the one hearing or seeing them. I did not create them because there is something else which is separate, which is seeing or hearing them. That is our initial experience. So start there. Start recognizing that I am not creating these visuals. I am not creating these sounds. Now come down into the body. Feel whatever sensations are here to be felt. Can you feel your seat on the chair, your feet on the floor, your arms on your legs? Can you possibly feel your heartbeat, blood flowing, churning in the belly? Feel any tension or pressure in the forehead or around the eyes. Feel if there's any tension in the throat or the shoulders. Just be aware of what's here. This is like the virtual room that gives body and experience and validity to any thoughts that show up. So we want to be very aware of the sensations that appear in this space. And now also notice the internal mental version of this felt space. So, for instance, if you imagine stubbing your toe, you can probably feel what it was like to have stubbed a toe. Or picture yourself on the front of a roller coaster, about to go over a steep drop. Do you feel the sensation of the belly rising? That whoosh that goes through the body? None of that is real and that is not happening right now, but it is still felt in the body. It's still felt in space. It's a sensation that we need to become aware of. You can also notice if there are any scents in the room around you right now. Can you smell the aromas of breakfast or lunch? You smell flowers, or just the room. And now bring to mind the scent of coffee. Can you picture what it's like to smell fresh roasted coffee? Can you actually smell it a little? And now tune into what it's like to taste something right now. Your mouth has some sort of flavor in it, whether it was what you've most recently eaten or drank, or just the flavor of a waiting mouth. What does it taste like right now? Where is that flavor showing up in your experience? Is it actually located at mouth level? Can you tell that flavor is associated with a tongue? And now remember what it was like to taste fresh coffee. Warm apple pie. To bite into a crunchy apple. The flavor and the sense memories are there for you to feel and experience right now. So the totality of these 5 external senses and 5 internal senses are the totality of our world. This is our entire experience. So whenever we feel like there is a self who is experiencing the world right now, it must be located somewhere in these fields. This is what we have to experience and discern the world. So right now, I want you to feel where you are located in all of this. What does it feel like to be a self here, now? It's going to be different from everybody, but many people feel like they're located somewhere behind their eyes, or somewhere in the chest, usually along the central channel. Feel the sensation that seems to be showing up in that space. And put so much attention on the sensation of where you seem to be located that the ideas about it, the labels about it being you, can be dismissed for now. Absorb purely into the physical sensation of where you seem to be. If you seem to be located somewhere in the head, see if you can feel the face and notice, are you behind or in front of those sensations that we take to be a face? You might even feel like you are somehow engulfing those sensations. If that's the case, then that should show you something very interesting. Feel the back of the head. Is the back of the head appearing in front of or behind where you seem to be? Again, you might even find that the back of the head is appearing in the same space where you seem to be located. Notice if the feeling of being here has something to do with the raw physicality of having a body, the weight, the density of being here. If that's the case, you can feel the boundaries of the body, where you take your skin to be. Again, if you have a visual image of the body, allow that to be there, but don't take it as truth. Simply come back to the raw sensations. Are those raw sensations telling you that there even is such a thing as skin or the boundary of a body? Feel any place where the body seems to come in contact with something, where there seems to be an edge. It might be with your seat, with clothing, or the floor. And put so much attention in those sensations that that boundary starts to dissolve. What you take to be the boundary of a body is not necessarily truth either. You might not have as much of it going on right now, but when you're going about your day, you might find that thoughts are playing a large role in this creation of a me, the feeling of being a self in a moment, in a particular situation. And then notice what thoughts are showing up and in which of the sense fields do they appear. So to get a feel for this right now, bring to mind something stressful that you're going to need to do in the next day or two. Most of us have some idea of an obligation, a job, something that we maybe aren't looking forward to, but need to do. And as this shows up, notice, is it a visual representation, like a snapshot of that task or that job or that situation? Is it a voice in the mind that is recounting a list of things that need to be done? Are you hearing somebody's voice who you're going to have to deal with that you would rather not have to deal with? Just take note of where those images are showing up, where those sounds are showing up. And as soon as they are, as soon as you get that sense of this is me and an obligation I have to fulfill, come into the body and feel what has changed. What has shown up alongside of these images and sounds? Is there suddenly a feeling of worry or concern? Are there particular contractions, tensions, rumbling, sweat, heat? Is there something that seems to be telling you that this thought is true? That this thought is really something I need to do, or else there are going to be consequences? And that only I can perform this task, or I am going to have to be in this situation that I really don't want to be in. Just recognize that those feelings in the body, the emotions and their sensations of those emotions, are what are making those thoughts seem real and dire, and making that situation seem like something you don't want to be in. You are not actually in the situation right now, and yet it can feel like you are. So that tells you that that situation is not real. It's not a concern. It's not a problem if you can imagine it and feel the same sensation now. You're living in a virtual reality where you are creating situations and your reactions to them. So we want to come back to what is actually here. In those sensations that appear in the body, can you tell that there is anything to be concerned about in that situation? In the sensations in the body, can you tell that those thoughts have any relationship to a me who has to do something about them? Notice if you immediately get another thought that responds and says, yes, of course it does. And maybe there's another image that shows up that reinforces this. But that is just another thought. The sound is just another thought. Our voices, all of the thoughts themselves, are just thoughts. The one who seems to be recognizing all of this is just another thought. So where in all of these senses can you find that one? It's not in the sensations in the body. You can keep looking. You can keep checking anytime it feels like there is a you who's somehow related to these sensations, whether they're emotional sensations or just felt bodily sensations like a pain, an ache, an itch, or temperature. It's not in the visual images that show up in the mind. No matter whether those images are of a body, of ideas of a personality, if it's your name, if it's old photographs of who you took yourself to be that are showing up, there's nothing about that visual thought that proves that that is you. Have you created that thought? Have you brought it to mind? If it feels like you are the internal thinker of the sounds, of the voice, notice that there is a hearing of those voices, but there is not a speaking or a choosing of the words. The I cannot be found in the auditory space either. So can the I be found in the sense of smell or the sense of taste? They might contribute at different times to what it feels like to be the totality of this human being. But they are just part of the experience. What we find is that there's this greater nebulous experience of self that we feel when we're not breaking down experience into its parts. Even if there feels to be this boundless openness, where are you experiencing that boundless openness from? Are you seeing a visual representation of it? Are you feeling a feeling of openness and spaciousness that transcends the boundaries that you take to be your normal body? But is it still showing up in some other sort of a sense field? Maybe just one that you're not used to placing as much attention on. What is here right now that can be defined as a me unless you are putting a concept, a label, onto a group of other sensations and calling it me? without a label, without a concept? Is there anything that fits that bill? There are open passing experiences of sensation. Are there any centralities here? Is there a central point that seems to be witnessing everything? Or can you sense every sensation as it shows up from the middle of that sensation? The more we get acquainted with the senses, the more we can lose that sense of locality and spaciousness, that spatial difference between me being located here and the sensations appearing over there at a distance, below, above. We just absorb, we stay open, and we allow that sense of self to collapse on its own. It's not a problem that it's here. It serves a purpose at certain times in our life. It's just not real. So these practices aren't to get rid of a sense of self. It's simply to see how the illusion is made and allow for at least a period for it to fall apart. Experience what life is like without a center. What life is like when the senses are not bound together into one unified experience of being me walking through a world. Instead, all the boundaries can fall apart. They can dissolve. And we can find that open, dissolved spaciousness at any moment when we tune in and become really aware without thought, without judgment, without resistance, without concept of what is actually appearing right now. Come back to your body. Take a deep breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
That
that.
was a very, very thorough way of, if people don't experience something with that meditation, they probably won't experience with anything.
Thank you.
Something I found fascinating about that was that it was filled with questions. And I found that it was actually not necessary to have any kind of conceptual or verbal answer to the questions, but the fact of the questions, the fact that the questions turned my attention inward
Yeah.
to direct experience was sufficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And that's exactly what we mean when we say that, let the body experience and express. So you pose, like, you experience questions that you are not supposed to answer intellectually, and you don't have to. The body hear what it is that is happening, and the body will respond to what is happening.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Thank you.
Well, how can people find out about all the different things that you do?
Wow, so many ways.
Yeah.
So the prime thing is if you have questions about anything that we do, you can email me at unfetterdmindfulness@gmail.com.
And on Unfettered Mindfulness on YouTube, you have tons of inquiries and meditations are collected there.
Yeah.
And then we have the Awakening curriculum on YouTube as well, and on Facebook and on Insta.
We also have theawakeningcurriculum.com.
Where you have everything we have made. It's on the page there. And that is working with the 10 fetters, the 10 different ways of identifying where you self and put yourself in the middle. And the way that we work with it is the wheel of identification. It's basically whatever is arising in your life right now, there is a fetter and there is lessons that can help you with dissolving that and coming back to your body and realizing what this is actually about. And that is what you use the awakening curriculum for. And when you work with the awakening curriculum, we also have a hive mind community on Discord for people that are working with the awakening curriculum, and that are so super supportive towards one another.
It's a wonderful community.
Yeah.
And for that, again, email me at unfetteredmindfulness.com. And if you give me a little, we're a little bit protective, so we don't just let everybody in who emails. So give a little bio about yourself, to just say, you know, how you found us, what your practice is, that sort of thing. Just because we want it to be a safe place for everybody. And, you know, we're trying to keep trolls and people out who might.
And then we have once a month, we have a Fetter inquiry group where we inquire about different things. So it's people, it's live on Zoom, where people, they come, they post different questions, and then we do inquiries with them into it. And you can see the recordings of the inquiry groups on Unfettered Mindfulness channel. And you can participate by sending an email to Todd, unfetteredmindfulness@gmail.com, and he will forward the link. It's the same link for the entire year. And then we have
and I was just going to say, and the Discord group is free. The inquiry group is free.
Yeah.
Obviously, all the stuff on
the entire curriculum is free. All inquiries and meditations are free. We're doing everything for free,
as much as possible.
Yeah, for donation. So if people want to support, we accept donations. I'm very, very grateful for the donations that we get. That makes all this possible. And then we have twice a year we have workshops. Like I said, the workshop last year that was embodiment of the fetters, and this year we have a workshop which is the mind-body integration. So it's looking back to how you became you, the personality that you have, what causes and conditions created you, and then supporting the body in experience and expressing. And that's the only thing that we charge for. And there's a beginning fee, a beginning donation, and then you can donate more if you want to. So we make it as cheap as possible so everybody can participate.
And we also had a 3-day retreat, and we do them all virtual. So far, none of them have been in person. So they're all recorded, but we had a 3-day retreat in January. And so last year's retreat, the 7-day retreat, is available for purchase now. If people want to record, the entire thing is recorded. There's 30 some videos that are part of it.
Yeah, it's like 100 hours of, of material.
And a PDF ebook. And then we also have the 3-day one that's available, and then we have this one.
We have this one with 100. All the 1 week, because it's 7 days workshop. They come with an ebook as well, so you have tools in your hands, and you have all the recordings to get back to, and you can re-listen as much as you want. And we have communities on Discord. We're so fortunate that we have supporters in every single time zone that can. So there's always somebody there that you can meet up with on Discord in a video room, and get support to whatever is going on in your life at the moment during the retreats and the workshops.
And we're planning on, at this point, another 7-day retreat that's going to be more about direct inquiry and meditation using, the fetters. Like, really, we in the past, we tend to be very information based. We tend to tell a lot of information.
We info dump.
We do. So the retreat, the 7-day, is going to be much more just experiential, lots of meditation, lots of inquiry, and that sort of thing. And that's going to be in November.
Which is with all 10 fetters again, but it's very inquiry based and meditation based in the fall.
And then we also have a new series of talks coming up at POK. So every 2 months we're going to be doing a talk on POK. So nice. The first one is May 25th.
POK is the perfectly okay
community. Yeah.
So and
so what I hear is that you're just starting out. You don't have much stuff out yet, and that.
And Todd's book.
Oh, and I have a book.
Yeah, if what I really like about the book is that it's a very unconventional awakening book, because it's describing how it was to come from suicidal ideation and depression and anxiety and bullying and all of those things, and then coming into being Todd today. And it's done with prose and with poems and with essays, and It's really, really beautifully.
It's an odd little book.
Yeah, no, it's really beautifully made. It's
What's that called?
Only in Your Mind.
Only in Your
Only
Mind.
in Your Mind. Okay.
Only in Your Mind. And the subtitle is Not Quite Poems from the Not So Linear Awakening Path, which
Thank you so much.
I really love that.
Thank you so much, Brian.
And
Well,
it's available.
It's been really wonderful and thorough, and I love the meditation. I love the work you're doing. It really gets to the heart of how we create limitations in ourselves and how we can go beyond that. And we want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you want extra stuff, extra blogs, techniques, conversation, go to patreon.com/awareness explorers. We send you a bunch of stuff for basically nothing.
Nice.
Anyways, many blessings on your work, and may it continue and impact people. Any last words, Brian?
Just to say thank you, and I'm very grateful to you both for being so generous with your time here. And
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Hear it.
Thank you.
And as you know, as a fan of this podcast, we always close with 2 magic words. Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.